Every Monday morning for 11 years, a girl named Hana Sato sat at the kitchen table in her grandmother's house in Bakersfield, California, and listened. Not to the radio, not to a television, not to her phone, which she did not yet have for the first 7 of those 11 years. She listened to her grandmother. Her grandmother, who was 79 years old and had come to California from Kumamoto, Japan in 1971, and had never quite surrendered the habit of speaking to the morning as if the morning were a person who deserved to be addressed. Her grandmother talked while she cooked breakfast. She talked about small things, large things, things that had happened decades before Hana was born and things that had happened the previous Tuesday. She talked about her husband, who had died when Hana's mother was young. She talked about the garden. She talked about the neighbors. She talked about things she had been reading and things she had been thinking and things she intended to do that she probably would not do because she had been intending to do them for 20 years and they had yet to get done. She talked, and Hana listened, and this is how Hana Sato learned to think. On a Friday afternoon in early June, Hana Sato was 17 years old and standing at a Family Feud podium in Burbank, California, with Steve Harvey leaning across the microphone asking her to name something that adults always get wrong about teenagers. She thought for 2 seconds. She gave an answer that no adult in 14 seasons of the show had ever given. Not because it was clever. Because it was true in the specific way that only someone who had spent 11 Monday mornings a year learning to listen could recognize it. And Steve Harvey, who had interviewed thousands of people on this stage, and had heard most of what there was to hear, went completely still. Because the answer described him. And he knew it. There is a kind of intelligence that game shows are designed to test and a kind of intelligence they are not. The kind they test: reaction time, survey intuition. The ability to think simultaneously about what you believe and what you think 100 strangers believe, and which of those two things is more likely to be on the board. The ability to hold your nerve when a clock is counting down and your family is watching, and the wrong answer means the X sound in front of a studio audience. These are real skills. They are not trivial. They require a particular kind of fast, socially calibrated thinking that some people have and some people don't. And the people who have it are not always the people you expect. The kind of intelligence Family Feud does not test, the kind that arrives slowly. The kind that comes from listening to the same person talk every Monday morning for 11 years. The kind that accumulates without being noticed, the way water accumulates in a basin. Until one day the basin is full and you tilt it slightly and what comes out surprises you with its volume. Steve Harvey has spent 14 seasons watching the first kind of intelligence in action. He had not, until a Friday afternoon in early June, watched the second kind arrive at his podium. It arrived in the form of a 17-year-old in a yellow cardigan who stood at the podium with the particular stillness of a person who was not nervous about the question, but was thinking carefully about the answer, and who gave that answer in a quiet, even voice that made 200 people in the audience look at each other. Not because they disagreed, because they recognized it. Hana Sato was 17 years old. She was 5'3", slight, with the posture of a person who spent a lot of time reading slightly forward, slightly inward. The posture of someone whose attention had been drawn toward something for so long that the body had rearranged itself around the direction of that attention. She wore her dark hair pulled back and wore, on the day of the taping, the yellow cardigan she always wore when she wanted to feel settled, which was her word for the feeling other people called confident, and which she considered more accurate. She was a junior at Franklin High School in Bakersfield, where she had a 4.1 GPA and was the co-editor of the school newspaper and had been playing piano since she was 6 years old. Not because anyone had required it, but because her grandmother had a piano in the front room of the house on Niles Street, and Hana had found, at 6, that pressing the keys produced a relationship between action and result that she found trustworthy in a way that not everything was trustworthy at 6. She was quiet in the way that people are quiet when they have a lot of interior activity that does not require external volume. She had been raised primarily by her grandmother, a Days. Not Japanese. The name came from her grandmother's deep and a budding love for a Nigerian novelist she had discovered in 1984, and who had changed the way she read the world, and who she had honored by giving herself an additional name in private, which was the name Hana had always known her by. Her grandmother's legal name was Kimiko. Inside the house on Nile Street, she was a Days, and Hana had grown up thinking this was simply what grandmothers were called until she was 10 and learned otherwise and found this distinction between the private and public self completely sensible. Hana's mother, Esther. No, different family. From the variation banks, Hana's mother was Morel, 39, who worked as a hospital administrator in Sacramento and who had arranged her life around 2 facts: that she loved her daughter without reservation and that she was not, by nature or training or available time, equipped to raise her alone. She had brought Hana to her mother's house in Bakersfield when Hana was 6, and the arrangement had become permanent in the way that arrangements become permanent when they work. Morel drove to Bakersfield every other weekend. She called every day. She was not absent. She was distributed, present in concentrated doses rather than continuous low-level exposure, and Hana had grown up understanding this as a shape of love rather than a failure of it. partly because her grandmother had been careful to describe it that way and partly because Hannah was a person who reads situations accurately and had read this one correctly. The Sato family had applied for Family Feud because Hannah's uncle Raymond, who was 46 and a science teacher in Fresno and who had allowed, organized enthusiasm for game shows that his students found either endearing or alarming depending on the student, had submitted the video application as a surprise for Hannah's grandmother's 79th birthday. The team was Hannah, her grandmother Adeza Kimiko, her uncle Raymond, her cousin Desmond, no retired name from the bank, her cousin Andre, 21, who was studying physical therapy and had the easy, undefended warmth of someone who had been around injured people long enough to have stopped finding vulnerability uncomfortable, and Morel, Hannah's mother, who had taken a Friday off work and driven down from Sacramento and who had not told Hannah she was coming until she knocked on the grandmother's door at 7:00 a.m., the morning of the taping. Hannah had opened the door and looked at her mother for a moment. Then she had said, "You didn't have to come all the way down." Morel had said, "I know." She had come in and had coffee and sat across from her mother, Hannah's grandmother, in the kitchen, and the two of them had talked in the easy, layered way of people who have worked something out over a long time and have reached a place of clarity about what they were to each other, and what they owed each other, and what they simply gave freely without keeping a ledger. Hannah had watched this and filed it with everything else she had been filing since she was 6. The load-bearing object was in the grandmother's bag. It was a small notebook, pale green cover, worn at the spine, filled from front to back with Adeza's handwriting. She had been keeping it for 30 years. It was not a journal. She had kept a journal separately, a different book, which she did not bring places. This notebook was something else, a collection of things she had heard or read or thought that seemed worth keeping. A sentence from a novel, a thing a neighbor had said, something Hannah had said at age 8 that was too good to let disappear. It was a record of what she had found worth listening to. Hannah had known about the notebook for years. She did not know she was in it. She did not know that on the 37th page, in her grandmother's small, careful handwriting, there was a record of something Hannah had said at age 9 that Adeza had written down within 10 minutes of hearing it, because she was afraid it would be gone if she waited longer. She would find this out on a Friday afternoon in Burbank, not because her grandmother told her, because Steve Harvey asked the right question. The Satos were matched against the Ruse family from Lubbock, Texas. The Ruses were warm, fast-talking, and organized in the way of a family that had been playing this game informally at every dinner table for 20 years, and had finally gotten to play it for real. The mother, a compact woman in her 50s named Gloria who taught middle school math, and had the specific quality of a person who explains things for a living and therefore explains everything, had clearly prepared. She made eye contact with each of her children before the game started in a way that communicated a strategy without using words. Raymond, watching from the contestant area, said to Hannah, "They have a system." "So do we," Hannah said. "What's our system?" he asked. Hannah looked at her grandmother, who was standing with her hands folded in front of her, watching the studio with the serene, amused attention of a woman who had lived through enough to find most things either interesting or funny. "Grandma," Hannah said. "Our system is Grandma," Raymond said. "Our system is Grandma," Hannah confirmed. Raymond considered this. "That's actually a very good system," he said. Steve Harvey worked through the warm-up and reached the Sato family, and his eye went, as it usually went in warm-ups, to the person in the group who was going to be the most interesting, which was the grandmother by a significant margin, and then ricocheted to Hannah, who was standing slightly to her grandmother's left with the yellow cardigan and the quiet that was not shyness. "Young lady," Steve said. "How old are you?" 17, Hannah said. 17. "And you're on the show today with your grandmother, and my mom and my uncle and my cousin." "But the anchor is Grandma," Steve said. He had not been told this. He had read it. "The anchor is Grandma," Hannah agreed. Steve turned to Adeza. "Mom, what do you think of your granddaughter?" Adeza looked at him. "She said she is the best listener I have ever met." She said it simply, not as a compliment in the way people deliver compliments, with a warmth designed to land softly. She said it as a fact, the way you state a fact you have verified thoroughly and have no uncertainty about. Steve looked at Hannah. Hannah was looking at her grandmother with the expression of a person who had just heard something they had not expected to hear and was deciding what to do with it. She did not say anything. "That's a high compliment," Steve said. "It's an accurate one," Adeza said. "From a grandmother," Steve said. "From a grandmother who clearly talks," and Adeza smiled. "I talk, she listens. We have been doing this for 11 years. It is a very good arrangement." "For you?" Steve said. "For both of us," Adeza said. "She knows things I didn't know I was teaching." Steve looked at Hannah one more time, with the look of a host who had just been told something interesting about a contestant and was filing it for later. He filed it. The game started. The Satos played well. Raymond was fast and enthusiastic and right about 60% of the time and deeply committed in the other 40, which made for good television even when it cost them points. Andre was accurate in the easy, unhurried way of someone who had learned, working with people in pain, to move without urgency and mean it. Morel was precise and a little surprised at herself each time she got an answer right, which suggested she had not expected to be good at this and was quietly pleased to be wrong about herself. Adaze played round 2. The category was things people say to make you feel better that make you feel worse. Steve had barely finished reading when Adaze said everything happens for a reason. Number 1 answer. 44 points. The audience applauded. Steve Harvey looked at her. Mom, he said. You got that too fast for someone who has never been made to feel worse by that sentence. I have been made to feel worse by that sentence many times, she said pleasantly. Would you like to talk about it? No, she said. Next question. The audience loved her. The Sados won the main game 421 to 381. Fast money, the family huddled briefly. Raymond made a case for himself with the energy of a man who had been preparing for this moment and needed it known. Andre deferred to the group. Morel looked at her daughter. Hannah was selected to go second, which meant she would answer the 5 questions with Adaze's answers already on the board. Knowing the scores, knowing what she needed. Adaze went first. She answered in 20 seconds with the economy of a woman who had spent 50 years pruning language to its necessary minimum. Question 1. Name something a teenager does that adults don't understand. Sleep late, she said. Number 2 answer. 19 points. Question 2. Name an activity that's more fun with friends. Eat, she said. Number 1 answer. 41 points. Question 3. Name something you find in every American home. Television, she said. Number 1 answer. 38 points. Question 4. Name a reason someone might skip breakfast. No time, she said. Number 3 answer. 16 points. Question 5. Name something adults always get wrong about teenagers. Adaze thought for 1 second. She said they think teenagers don't listen. A number 4 answer. 11 points. Total 125 points. She needed 75 more from Hannah. She came out from behind the screen and took her place with the family. Raymond squeezed her arm. Andre nodded. Morel looked at her mother with the look of a daughter who is also, in some ways, the student. Adaze looked at Hannah. She said nothing. She just looked at her, the way you look at someone when you are communicating something that does not have a word. Hannah nodded. She walked to the podium. Steve set the clock. 20 seconds. 5 questions. 75 points needed to win 22,000. Question 1. Name something a teenager does that adults don't understand. Adaze had said sleep late. Hannah needed something different. She said talk in their own language. The board checked. Number 1 was use their phone. Number 2 was sleep late. Number 3 was listen to loud music. Talk in their own language was not on the board. Question 2. Name an activity that's more fun with friends. Adaze had taken eat. Hannah needed something different. She said walk. The board checked. Number 1 was eat. Number 2 was watch movies. Number 3 was shop. Number 4 was travel. But walk was not on the board. 2 questions in. 0 points so far. She needed 75 from 3 questions. Question 3. Name something you find in every American home. Adaze had taken television. Hannah needed something different. She said, something broken that hasn't been fixed yet. A sound moved through the audience. Not laughter. Not quite. The sound of 200 people recognizing something simultaneously. The board checked. Number 1 was television. Number 2 was couch. Number 3 was microwave. Something broken that hasn't been fixed yet was not on the board. The audience made the sound again. The same recognizing sound, mixed now with the gentle frustration of watching something that deserves to be right not be on the board. Question 4. Name a reason someone might skip breakfast. Adaze had taken no time. Hannah needed something different. She said, not hungry yet? Still full from thinking. Steve Harvey looked up from the question card. The board operator checked. Not on the board. But Steve was still looking at her. The clock had run down to 3 seconds. Question 5. Name something adults always get wrong about teenagers. This was the question. Adaze had answered it. The board had given her 11 points for they think teenagers don't listen. Hannah had 3 seconds. She did not use all 3, she said. They stop asking teenagers questions because they've decided they already know the answers. The clock ran out. The buzzer sounded, not on the board. 0 points from Hannah. Total combined score 125, 75 points short of the 22,000 prize. The audience made the sound of a score that was not enough. But Steve Harvey had not moved to the score. He was standing very still at the podium. He was looking at Hannah. He had the expression of a man who has just heard something that located something in him. Not a memory exactly, but a recognition. The recognition of a truth that arrives from outside you and matches something already inside you that you had not been able to name until the outside arrived. Hold on, he said. It was quiet. No audience chatter, no production movement. Just, hold on. Say that again, he said to Hannah. The last answer, say it again. Hannah looked at him. She said it again exactly as she had said it, in the same quiet, even voice. They stop asking teenagers questions because they've decided they already know the answers. Steve Harvey looked at the audience. The audience looked at him. He looked back at Hannah. How old are you again, he said. 17, she said. He nodded slowly. 17, he said. And you've figured that out at 17. My grandmother taught me, she said. Steve looked at Adaze. Adaze was looking at her granddaughter. Her expression was the one she had when something confirmed what she already believed. Not surprise, not pride in the performative sense. The quieter thing. The thing that came from 11 years of Monday mornings, and talking while cooking breakfast and watching someone listen and knowing, when you watched them listen, that the listening was going in somewhere, that would produce something eventually. And then seeing the something arrive. Steve paused. He looked at the family. I'm sorry, I don't... What do I call you? What does she call you? She calls me a daze, the grandmother said. A daze, Steve said. Your granddaughter just told me, in front of this whole room, what adults always get wrong about teenagers. And the answer she gave is the answer I've been guilty of every single day of my career. He paused, including today. Before this conversation, I was guilty of it 5 minutes ago. A daze looked at him. Tell me what you mean, she said. It was not a question. It was an invitation. The kind of invitation a teacher extends when a student has found the edge of something and needs a moment to see the other side. Steve Harvey accepted the invitation. I have been doing this show for a long time, Steve said. He had stepped slightly away from the podium. Not far. Just the step of a person who needs a moment of movement in order to think in motion. And in all that time, all these seasons, all these families, when a teenager comes up to this podium, I talk to them differently than I talk to adults. He stopped. Not worse. I'm not saying worse. I talk to them more. I talk to them in a way that assumes they're going to be funny. I assume they're going to say something unexpected and a little wrong. I assume they're going to be charming in the specific way teenagers are charming, which is that they don't know they're being charming. He looked at Hannah. And I assume that when I ask them a serious question, they're not going to give me a serious answer, because I've already decided. He stopped. I already decided, he said. Before I asked, the studio was still. That's what you meant, he said to Hannah. Isn't it? That's what I meant, she said. Steve Harvey looked at the audience. How many people in this room have done that, he said. Not just to teenagers. To anyone. You've decided you already know the answer someone is going to give, and so you stop asking with your full attention. You ask, but you've already left the question. You're already waiting for them to finish so you can confirm what you expected. He paused. You already know. So you stop listening. 30 people nodded. Not all at once. 1, then 3, then a cluster in the middle section, then a man in the back who did not nod but whose eyes changed in a way that meant the same thing. Where'd you learn that? Steve asked Hannah. Specifically. Where did that come from? She thought about it. Monday mornings, she said. Tell me, she told him about the kitchen table. About her grandmother talking while she cooked. About how the talking had not been directed at Hannah. It had been directed at the kitchen, at the morning, at the general air of the house, and Hannah had been present for it, sitting at the table, and over 11 years the things that went into the air had settled into her. She talked about everything, Hannah said. Big things and small things. Things from before I was born. And she never adjusted what she was saying because I was the one listening. She talked to me the way she would have talked to someone her own age. She didn't make it simpler. She didn't explain things she thought I wouldn't understand. She just talked and expected me to follow. And when I didn't follow, I went and found out how to follow. She paused. That's the thing, she said. She expected me to follow. She didn't assume I couldn't. She just talked and trusted that I would catch up to the parts I hadn't gotten to yet. Adiz, standing with the family, was very still. She reached into her bag. She was not going to take out the notebook yet. She was not ready to take out the notebook yet. But her hand found the spine of it, the worn green spine, and she held it there from outside the bag the way you hold a thing that steadies you. Your grandmother trusted you, Steve said to Hannah. She trusted that I was capable, Hannah said. Which is different from trusting me to behave a certain way. It's trusting that there's something there to work with. She paused. Most adults trust teenagers to behave, or they don't trust them at all. Grandma trusted that I was capable of receiving things, of being a place where things could land. Steve Harvey was quiet. He was quiet in the way he was quiet 3 or 4 times a season, when something was being said that required the full attention and could not be received while simultaneously preparing a response. He received it. Then he said, I want to ask you something, and I want you to know it's a real question. Not a game show question. Okay? Hannah said. What do you think teenagers actually need from adults that they're not getting? There was a sound from the audience. The small, immediate sound of 200 people registering that a host of a game show had just asked a 17-year-old a question that most adults did not ask teenagers and meant it. Hannah looked at him. She thought for a moment. To be asked, she said. To be asked what they think, and then to have the adult wait for the actual answer instead of the answer they expected. To be asked and not have the question already answered on their behalf. She paused. Not to be fixed. Not to be taught. Just to be asked. And then listened to. The way my grandmother listens. The woman in the 4th row who had been holding herself together since something broken that hasn't been fixed yet, stopped holding herself together. Not because the answer was sad. Because it was simple and true and she had a teenager at home and she was thinking right now, in this studio in Burbank on a Friday afternoon in June, about the last time she had asked her teenager a real question and then waited. Actually waited, not assembled her response, for the actual answer. She could not, at this moment, remember when that had been. She was going to find out what it would feel like. That night, she was going to go home and find out. And then Adiz took the notebook out of her bag. The notebook was pale green, worn at the spine. The cover had a small floral pattern that had faded to the suggestion of flowers. You could see where the print had been without quite seeing what it had been. She had bought it at a stationery store in Bakersfield in 1994, 30 years ago, because she had seen it on the shelf and thought that is the right size for what I want to put in it. She had been right. She held it in both hands. I have something I want to read, she said. Her voice was the same as always. Quiet, even. The voice of a woman who had been choosing her words carefully for 80 years and no longer had to work at the choosing. Steve Harvey nodded. The production booth, which would ordinarily be moving toward a commercial break by now, was not moving, the riso on the floor. A recurring presence in moments like this, gave the hand signal, let it go. I have been keeping this notebook for 30 years, Adaid said. It is not a journal. It is a record of things worth keeping. Things I heard or read or thought. She opened it. She knew exactly which page she was going to. She had opened this notebook hundreds of times and always knew where the pages were, the way you know where things are in a house you have lived in for a long time. This entry is from 12 years ago. Hannah was 5 years old. Hannah was still. Something had changed in her expression. The composed listening quality was the same, the quality that had been there from the beginning. But there was something underneath it now. The expression of a person who is about to receive something they did not know existed. Adaid found the page. She read, Hannah asked me this morning why the piano sounds sad sometimes when the song is not sad. I said I didn't know. She said she thought maybe the piano remembered other songs it had played and the memory got into the notes. I wrote this down because I am afraid that if I don't write it down it will be gone. And it should not be gone. She looked up from the notebook. Hannah was looking at her grandmother. The expression on Hannah's face was not the expression of a person who had just heard something surprising. It was the expression of a person who had just understood something that had always been true, but had not yet had a name. She had been in the notebook. She had been in the notebook since she was 5 years old. Her grandmother had been listening too. All those Monday mornings, all that talking. Adaid at the stove, Hannah at the table, the morning between them. Hannah had understood herself to be the listener. She had understood her grandmother as the source of things. She had not understood that the exchange was mutual, that her grandmother had been listening too, that things Hannah had said at 5 and 7 and 9 and 12 had been worth writing down, had been written down, had been kept for 30 years in a pale green notebook with a faded floral cover. There are others, Adaid said. She turned a few pages. Age 7. Grandma, do you think the people in old photographs know they're going to be old? Age 9. I think being patient is just trusting that things happen at the speed they happen and not the speed you want. Age 12. I don't think silence is the opposite of talking. I think silence is what talking is resting on. She closed the notebook. She looked at Hannah. You have been teaching me, she said, since you were 5 years old. I have been learning from you, she paused. I did not tell you because I thought you already knew. I thought it was evident. But perhaps I was doing the same thing I taught you not to do, assuming the other person already understood what I had not yet said out loud. Hannah was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I didn't know. I know, her grandmother said. I'm sorry it took a game show. You're not sorry, Hannah said. No, Adaid said. I'm not. They looked at each other. 54 years of age between them, and the look between them was the look of two people of equivalent, standing meeting in the space where they had always been meeting, recognizing the equivalence for the first time out loud. Steve Harvey had not spoken in several minutes. He spoke now, quietly. I have a question, he said. He looked at Hannah. The entry from when you were 9, he said. The one about patience. I'm going to ask you about that. Hannah waited. You said, I think being patient is just trusting that things happen at the speed they happen and not the speed you want. He stopped. He looked at her. Where did that come from? He said. At 9 years old. Where does a 9-year-old get that? Hannah thought. She looked at her grandmother. Monday mornings, she said. And the audience, 200 people who had come to a game show on a Friday afternoon in June, and had ended up somewhere else entirely, made the sound that is not quite laughter and not quite tears but lives in the good country between those two things. The country you visit when something true has been said by the right person at the right time in a room where enough people were paying attention to receive it. The applause started in the front and moved back. Not fast. Steadily. The way something moves when it is finding the whole room rather than trying to reach it. Steve Harvey stood at the edge of his stage and let it go for a moment. Then he walked back to the center. I need to say something, he said. And I want to say it carefully. He looked at Hannah, he looked at Adaid. We built this show for families, he said. That is the premise. Come in, be a family, answer some questions, maybe win some money. And in all the years I have been here, the families have shown me things I did not know about families. About how they communicate and how they don't. About what they carry and how they carry it. About what they know about each other and what they assume about each other, and how often those two things are the same thing and how often they are very different. He paused. But I have never seen, in all those years, I have never seen a grandmother and a granddaughter sit at opposite ends of an 11-year conversation and find out, in the middle of a game show, that it was not one person teaching and one person learning. It was both. The whole time, both. He looked at the audience. How many of you have someone in your life you assume you are teaching, A child, a student, a younger sibling, someone you mentor, and you are the source and they are the receiver, and that is the structure you have understood it to have. The hands went up. More than 30 this time. Closer to 50. And how many of you, Steve said, have been taught something by that person? Something real, something that stuck. And did not tell them. Did not say I heard that, I kept that. That changed something in me. The hands did not go down, they stayed up. Some of them shifted. A slight, involuntary adjustment. The physical equivalent of yes, that too, that is the one I meant. We tell children that they matter, Steve said. We tell teenagers their ideas are good. We say it in the specific way of adults who are trying to be encouraging. He stopped. But Adaze did not tell Hannah that her ideas were good. She wrote them down. She kept them for 30 years. She made a record of them because they were worth keeping. That is a different thing entirely. That is not encouragement. That is recognition. He looked at Hannah. You gave me an answer today that described me, he said. I said it earlier and I meant it. I asked teenagers questions for 14 seasons and I expected the answers I expected. I was not fully in the question. I was in the answer I was waiting for. He paused. I am going to change that. Starting today. Starting with this conversation, which I did not start well, but which I intend to finish correctly. He turned to Hannah fully. Hannah, he said. What do you think about that? It was a real question. He waited. She looked at him. Then she said, I think the fact that you're asking is already the answer. He smiled. Not the host's smile, the real one, I think. He said, you're going to be very good at whatever you decide to do. She is going to be a writer. Adaze said, from the family area, in the tone of someone stating a fact rather than expressing a hope. Hannah looked at her grandmother. You've never said that, Hannah said. You've never needed me to, Adaze said. The audience was on its feet before either of them finished. The woman from the fourth row who had been thinking about her teenager was standing and crying openly, and had decided that was all right. The man who had come alone was on his feet, and was looking at the stage with the expression of someone who had come to the right place at the right time for reasons he did not fully understand and was grateful. Morel, Hannah's mother, who had driven down from Sacramento that morning and stood in this studio all afternoon watching her daughter be exactly who she had raised her to be, who had let her mother raise her, which was the hardest thing she had ever done and the best one, was standing next to her own mother with her arm around her mother's shoulders. She was not crying. She was looking at her daughter. The way you look at someone you love, who has just shown you something about themselves that you had always known was there, but had not yet seen from the outside. Andre had his arms crossed in the comfortable way of someone who was moved and did not need to manage it. Raymond, who had come to this taping with the enthusiasm of a man who had been waiting his whole life to be on Family Feud, was standing with his hands pressed together in front of his mouth, which was not a position he normally occupied, and was looking at his niece with an expression that said, I always knew, but I didn't know how much. Steve Harvey looked at all of them. He looked at the notebook in Adaze's hands. Mrs. He paused again. Adaze, can I ask you something? You can ask me anything, she said. The notebook. The 30 years of things worth keeping. Was there ever an entry about yourself? Something you thought, or said, or figured out that went in Adaze thought about it? One, she said. What does it say? She opened the notebook to the very last page with writing on it. She read, I have been talking for 80 years and I have finally found someone who knows how to listen. She is 5 years old, and she is sitting at my kitchen table, and she is looking at me the way I have always wanted to be looked at. I am going to talk to her every Monday morning for as long as I am able. I am going to trust that what I say is going somewhere worth going. She closed the notebook. That was the first entry about her, she said. The one about the piano was the second. The studio was absolutely still. Then Steve Harvey said, in the voice that was not the host's voice as she went exactly where you trusted her to go. The Sados did not win the 20,000. Hannah's score had been 0. The combined total of 125 was 50 points short. When Steve announced the number, he did it quietly and moved on quickly, which was its own kind of acknowledgement the score was not the point of this afternoon, and everyone knew it. After the taping, Adaze gave Hannah the notebook, not formally, not with ceremony. She handed it to her in the green room the way you hand a person something that has been theirs for a long time, and you are only now recognizing the paperwork. For you to continue, she said. Hannah held it. She opened it to a blank page near the back. She had not brought a pen. Raymond, who had been a teacher long enough to never not have a pen, produced one from his jacket pocket. Hannah wrote one line. She did not show it to anyone. She closed the notebook and put it in the pocket of the yellow cardigan. She did not show it to anyone until 3 years later, when she submitted her college application essays, and one of them began. My grandmother taught me to listen by never adjusting what she said because I was the one listening. The essay was about the notebook, about the Monday mornings, about the kitchen table and the piano and the things that go into the air between two people when one of them is talking and the other one is deciding to pay full attention. About the game show, briefly, a paragraph, and what Steve Harvey had asked and what she had answered, and what it felt like to give an answer in public that she had not known she knew until it came out. She was accepted at 4 universities. She chose the one with the best journalism program. She was, as Adaze had said in the tone of someone stating a fact, going to be a writer. She already was one. The notebook now lived on Hannah's desk in her dorm room in her first year of college. She added to it the way her grandmother had, not every day, not on a schedule, but when something arrived that seemed worth keeping. A sentence she read. Something a professor said. Something a friend said at 2 in the morning in the way that people say true things at 2 in the morning, without the guard that the daytime kept up. She called her grandmother every Monday morning. She had started doing this the Monday after the taping and had not stopped. Not at 5:15. Not in a kitchen. Over the phone from wherever she was, while her grandmother was in the kitchen on Niles Street. Adaze talked. Hannah listened. And Adaze listened too. Now openly, without the pretense that the conversation only moved in one direction. And when Hannah said something worth keeping, Adaze went to the notebook. Her notebook now. Their notebook. The pale green cover with the faded floral pattern that had once been flowers. 30 years old and still not full. If this story found you, if you have a Monday morning, or a kitchen table, or a person who talked and trusted you to follow, then you know what this channel is for. We find the quiet things. The things that happen before the day begins. The things that get written down so they won't be lost. Subscribe and stay with us for the next one.